Hello, everybody, and welcome, folks, to the Ttrpg Designer Spotlight. It is a special program where we uplift and showcase the work of marginalized game designers, especially those of marginalized identities. And with that, it is very, very important that I take some time today to talk about the ongoing genocide that's happening in Palestine, because I and this channel stand against genocide and ethnic cleansing and support all the oppressed peoples of the world struggling against injustice, imperialism, and colonization. Free Congo, free Sudan, free Palestine. And on that note, I do want to take an extra moment to talk about the atrocities that are happening over in Palestine and the situation that's ongoing. I do not want us to think that after the global strike, it is time to relent. Each of our voices matter. Please reach out to your representatives, find out the local community building organizations that are happening in your city, donate, uplift Palestinian voices in social media, and do not relent. All of our voices can make a chorus. Please do not relent. Our voices matter. And with that, thank you for hearing me out. And with that, let me introduce myself. I am Valiant Doran. I use him, his pronouns. You can find me all around the internet at Valiant Doran or also SpiritBear. Please enjoy that lovely treasure I just set you on. And I will be your host for tonight's Designer Spotlight. And I have a wonderful, amazing guest with me tonight. She is a queer and trans game designer known for Warrenguard and Sapphic Space Pirates, and she designs games on human relationships based in fantastical settings. Natalie, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Pudim of Luck of the Harbor. I am, like you said, a queer trans game designer. I'm based out of Baltimore, Maryland, in the US. I design games about human relationships, and I'm so excited to be here. Warrenguard is on BackerKit right now, which I think you were going to talk about, right?
Yes, absolutely. Warrenguard is here and is available on BackerKit. Please use !Warrenguard to go and click the link and support us, support them on BackerKit. First of all, congratulations on hitting your goal and for all the wonderful support that's flowed in for Warrenguard. For those of you who do not know, Warrenguard is a fantasy TTRPG about being a dragon rider and the reality of how found families form in adversity and carving comfort in adversity. So if you love that, please go and support Warrenguard on BackerKit right now. The link can be found with !Warrenguard, and please support Natalie as well. Use !Designer to find the link to go and support Natalie and follow her on social media. Amazing. And with that, I think we should jump right into the interview. But before that, I just remembered I should mention, folks, if you're enjoying tonight's Designer Spotlight, please consider donating and leaving us a tip. There's a little bar for Ko-Fi right above up there. The funds raised will be distributed evenly between our tech producer and our guest designer. Please use !donate in chat to support us. And with that, we can get into the wonderful, wonderful game of Warrenguard. First off, again, I have to say it again because I love seeing indie designers succeed, and congratulations once again for the success of Warrenguard. How do you feel?
It's unbelievable. Like, it's hard to, like, I had a therapy appointment this morning where I was just trying to process, hey, I had talked to you about worst case scenario so much. What do I do with best case scenario? Like, I don't know how to deal with this.
Thank you for the coping mechanisms in worst case scenarios. Yeah. What about coping for the best case scenarios?
Yes. Like, I was like, I don't know this feeling. Like, it's a feeling I'm not used to. And my therapist, like, it's contentment. And I was like, what's that?
Oh, I'm so happy for you. I'm genuinely so happy for you. For folks at home, Natalie and I have been planning to have this interview for a while now, so I've just been sitting here watching the BackerKit go, okay, yes, give the money, like scrolling and checking on the link very regularly because I love dragon riding. But before we talk about all things dragon riding and Warrenguard, I want to talk about you, Natalie. I want to talk about your origin story as a TTRPG designer, and specifically, I want to know, how'd you get into TTRPGs in the first place?
My first tabletop role-playing game was in my early 20s before I transitioned and was hanging out with a big group of your traditional TTRPG players. And believe it or not, my first TTRPG was Warhammer 40K role-playing by Fantasy Flight, and somehow I stuck with the hobby.
I want to say I'm surprised, but part of me hears that and goes, that feels right. That feels correct.
Yeah. I somehow stayed with it after that, and then moved to Mutants and Masterminds very shortly, which was the first game I ran. I ran a superhero game in that, but all these like crunchy systems. And then it was in probably 2014, I discovered PBTA games, and like that like blew my mind as someone. I immediately started writing one, and that game eventually, like, it kept like bloating and becoming this monstrosity, and I would write things and fidget with it all the way up until 2020. Like from 2012 to 2020, I was fidgeting with this one game. And part of my problem, I realize now, was I was trying to make a game that was for everyone. I wanted a game that everyone could play and be happy. And then in 2020, I was like, why don't I just strip this all down, start over, and write the game I want? I was writing this big epic space fantasy that was based on Greek mythology. And then when I stripped it down, it became Sapphic Space Pirates. And that's what Sapphic Space Pirates is. And I wrote that as a project while I was out of work at the start of the pandemic, and put it together and started playtesting it, and immediately got good feedback. And it started there. And the game was just... So that was a game that had this huge convoluted development cycle, which, as we talk about Warrenguard, will become a theme. You'll see.
I love hearing about the development cycle, though, game design, and I think a lot of audience members do as well. I think it kind of like demystifies game design a lot, because game design, I think from the outside perspective, if you're not actively game designing, just kind of goes like, someone waves a magic little wand, does a lot of math, and then a game happens. I think is a lot of the perspective of how game design works. When really it's a lot of open word processing document, writing a sentence and going no, and then redoing it all over again. So you've started building this kind of like large epic game design. Was that your first foray into game design? Was that early version of Sapphic Space Pirates? Okay, amazing.
Yes.
What made you go, I am about to embark on a crusade to make this large game before it became Sapphic Space Pirates?
I have always been someone with a very active imagination, but I will tell you my limitations. I've written some prose for Warrenguard, but prose is not my strong suit.
Gotcha.
Like, prose is not somewhere where I really excel. So when it first clicked for me that I could write games, it was a way to get all these ideas I had in my head out. Like, these are the things that, you know, when I'm driving and I'm daydreaming about, no, I'm flying a spaceship through an asteroid field, like, hey, I want that world to be a world other people can play in and talk about and all that. And that was what really drove me to game design. It was a creative outlet that I felt like I could. It's a creative outlet where you get to create a lot in the form of bulleted lists.
You're right. You're so right. Yes, absolutely.
Instead of actually having to, and so instead of actually having to string chunks of prose together and like link it with various words and use the right punctuation, I get to just be like, here's a really evocative list of things. And go.
Yes.
And that speaks to me as someone. So it was really just finding this creative outlet that
Mm.
drove me to it.
That is extremely cool that you were as a game designer were immediately like, this is a creative outlet. And it's first of all, thank you for being so vulnerable about. I know it's really
Uh-huh.
hard as creatives to kind of like talk about and reveal like aspects about our creativity that is difficult or not our
Uh-huh.
strongest suit. But that leads me to my next question. As you ventured into game design, whether it was making the earlier iteration of Sapphic Space Pirates, or even Warrenguard, when you first started, what did you find most daunting about game design? Were there aspects that you found daunting or frightening?
Yeah, I struggle with an empty page. Like
Mm,
just staring at like an empty page and being like, knowing that, hey, this needs to be a book, like it is hard. And
mm,
I've luckily found coping mechanisms for that, but it's still something I struggle with. Like,
mm.
someone will be like, hey, I need this like piece of lore for the world, and I'll just be like, I have no ideas. But then, I've built like I found like my creative process now. I'll
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that. Like I keep a little notebook in my purse all the time, and I'll write like a bulleted
Oh wow.
outline. And then because that's a lot less, like I'll write it like while I'm at my day job at work and just be like this, and this. And then when I
Mm.
get to the actual thing and I pull up Google Docs and I'm staring at this empty thing, I pull out that little notepad and then it's not empty.
Oh
And
my
I'm able to like kind of
goodness.
flesh out things like that. But yeah, I've very much struggled with empty page syndrome a lot.
Mm. Oh no, listen, I feel you on that regard. I think it's a whether you're a writer, whether you're a game designer, the hardest part is starting, and seeing that blank page is always difficult because the only way to start is by starting, and you just have to sit there
Right,
with that and deal with. And if you have ADHD, deal with the executive dysfunction of it all as
right.
you handle through that. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm gonna
Yeah.
ask you a kind of like a very larger than life like thematic question here,
Uh-huh.
um, which is we've talked about your game design and your history and how incredibly wild that it is that you started
Uh-huh.
TTRPGs with Warhammer 40k.
Uh-huh.
I wanted to ask you why do you game design? What pushes you into that particular creative field rather than any other creative venture?
I think it started as, like I said, being a creative outlet where I could create in like bulleted lists. But I think the thing that made me keep going
Hmm.
was the first time you see people play your game, and
Mm-hmm.
like that immediate feedback of them like clicking with it. And then another step, seeing people play your game with you not running it, like just being in a room where other people are running your game and they're
Mm-hmm.
laughing and they're having a good time. That is a as someone who is I'm a Leo, I crave validation. As someone who needs that, like that feeling of people. Oh, there's one thing playtesters say to me all the time.
Mm.
They say to me all the time, I'm tooting my own horn.
You're
But when
allowed.
playtesters are like, oh, this is such a hard choice, when they're looking at choices I have, I'm like, yes. Like,
It's such a no, it's truly such a validating feeling, right? Because it means that you've created two options that are equally like not only difficult and or devastating, but also like important. It matters. The
right,
choice matters.
right.
And putting someone in that position of, oh god, this choice matters, is such a
Uh-huh.
rewarding feeling. I
Yeah.
completely get it. Oh, I love that. I love hearing that you were able to kind of experience watching other people play your game. That's deeply, deeply cool. And with that, your games, fantastic couple of games we've got over here. So
Uh-huh.
this is where I get to ask you a question I ask all of my designers.
Uh-huh.
What is a Natalie core game? what elements make up a Natalie core game?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked me this to give a peek behind the curtain for the
Yes.
audience. Valiant asked this question in advance, and I'm so glad you did, because if you put me on the spot for this, like your question, I just want to praise you as an interviewer and tell you how great you are. Like that question, like really made me like answer questions that I hadn't before, and I think one of the things is, I write games that are about human relationships. Like at the end of the day, like when I write classes, and this is something I've had to like talk to other people, because now I have stretch goal writers who are writing in the world of Warrenguard, and be like, no, you're like, classes are not about the things you do. They're about how you relate to each other in Warrenguard. And the same in Sapphic Space Pirates. Like it's games about relationships at the end of the day. Like maybe you're in this fantastic setting, but Sapphic Space Pirates, once I actually got it written and on the page, like I realized immediately, like, oh, this is a game about my roller derby team. Like this is me expressing.
You told me this before. I remember this.
Yeah, it's about expressing these feelings and relationships I had, and just like that, Warrenguard is based on this workplace I worked in my early 20s, where I worked with people who were kind of all over the age spectrum and had like all of these different things. And we were working like night shifts. So you were just alone with these people who you would never have chosen in real life, and just stuck in this like situation with them, and the connections that you build. And like, I think I really write games that are about real human relationships. And also another thing that Kay just pointed out in chat, Kay is a friend of mine and a playtester, is my games are queer even when like Warrenguard is a game, like it's a queer game. I'll say that, like I write queer, but it's a game I didn't intentionally write queer. Like this was my, like I said, like Sapphic Space Pirates started out as me swinging for like a more general audience. Warrenguard was my attempt to be like, what happens if I swing for a general audience? You know, like in this promotion, I've made posts on Reddit. Like I'm hoping that this is a game for everyone.
Godspeed. Oh wow, you ventured there. Oh, Godspeed.
I'll tell you that. I'll tell you some more about that a little bit later.
Yes.
But it's a game where I tried to swing for everyone, and then people kept describing the game as queer, and I was like, you know, it's so interesting. And Brian's like, have you read your game? Like, it's one of the gayest games. Like, one of the choices for the old timer is like a thing you will never let go of, and it's a sweet, soft woman who lives in the hold below. And Brian's like, that's the gayest sentence I've ever read, Natalie. Like, who are you kidding?
I have to agree. I heard you say that, and I was just like, oh, Natalie, oh, come on.
This is my try to write a game that was palatable to straight people. And I think this game, more than Sapphic Space, I've run Sapphic Space Pirates for tables full of straight men at conventions, and they have a great time, but it's always a learning opportunity for them. Gotcha. Whereas Warrenguard, I think they would have a great time and not catch it. Whereas I think, you know, all the queer people will immediately get all the queer tones to the game.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think queer human relationships are what make a Natalie game.
Gorgeous. What a fantastic answer, and so many really cool things for me to pick at later. But I do want to pick at the idea about designing games about human relationships in fantastical settings. What does that mean to folks who are stumbling onto this and hearing these large thematic words? What does that mean to you about building a game about human relationships in fantastical settings?
Yeah, like I think so much of the wider role-playing setting, and I will say there's these niche indie games, this like great community. The games I love are also about human relationships, but I think in kind of a wider setting, like in the Reddit RPG Reddit, which I guess will become a theme of people I talk about on this interview. Like the first thing people approach is like, well, how do I fight something?
Yes,
and Warrenguard as a game, like it's a game about fighting. You are the protectors of this small group of humanity. You're fighting giant monsters.
Mm-hmm.
But the first thing you can do, like the way each chapter starts, is these slice of life sections where you're playing with almost belonging outside belonging-esque mechanics, where the things you can do are, back up someone who needs it, which can be a fight mechanic.
Yeah.
But it also can be like someone who's in an argument and you back them up, and that is a mechanic in the game.
Yeah.
One of the old timers things they can do as a weak move, which a weak move in the game is something that moves the story forward in a detriment to your character, is the old timer can like be on the outside of their comrades connecting, and like those sort of relationships are mechanically built into the game and intertwined in ways.
Yeah.
And I also wrote the game in a way where those connections, like the old timer has a move where they can, or the caretaker, I believe, has a move where they can bottle their emotions, but so does the ace. And like, it's this way that connects them of like, these two people are bottling their emotions, and like there's these threads through that show that this kind of character grows into this kind of character, or this is where these type of characters diverge, and it's just all about human relationships.
I love that. As soon as you read some of these mechanics, I immediately thought about some of the players in my life who would use that to torment me specifically. The idea of like having a move to bottle up your emotions had me thinking about one of my fellow cast members of Translator RPG and how he would menace me with a move like that. I love that. Fantastic answer. And human, and I think in TTRPGs, having human relationships is such a cornerstone that it's so interesting to kind of hear each designer's different perspectives on how to engage with that idea of like human relationships in the settings that they're set in. I'm about to ask you a really difficult question, Natalie, so I'm just gonna warn you.
I'm about to give you a really difficult answer. I hope you're ready.
All right, fantastic. I want to know, because you're a fantastic game designer in this space. I want to know, what do you want your impact in the TTRPG game design space to be?
Oh, that is a good question. Dang. I want to... One of the game designers who's really inspired me, and I'm incredibly lucky to count as a friend, and is now a stretch goal writer on Warrenguard, is Jay Dragon. Yes. And I can't speak highly enough about Jay, but the thing Jay did as a friend is Jay showed me what Jay's games looked like early, and Jay showed me Jay's games when they just existed in a binder. And Jay also like read my Sapphic Space Pirates early on when it was in its first zine printing and complimented it and lifted up. And I'm really gushing about Jay now, but as you asked this question, like I realized what I want to do is have the same kind of impact Jay had on me as a designer for other people. Another set of designers who I really admire are Vincent and Meg Baker. At Big Bad Con this past year, they hold breakfast every morning for game designers.
Yeah.
Where game designers just pick their mind for questions. And Vincent Baker wrote this series of essays. Warrenguard, way back, I'll get into the development history of Warrenguard, but at one point it was a PBTA game. And Vincent Baker wrote this series of essays on what PBTA is and isn't that made me realize PBTA wasn't right for me. And like being able to write and reflect on your own game system and teach it in a way that isn't just like my game system is the best and here's why, but here's what makes it right for your system, like is such a thing. So I hope that as a game designer, I can open the door for other game designers. Like I really want to leave as much of a path and uplift. And that's why, now that I'm funded, I'm made a point, like in today's update, if you were
Yeah.
a Warrenguard follower on BackerKit, like I'm going to once a week be shouting out other games that are crowdfunded
Mm-hmm.
that you should also give your time, attention, and money to. And yeah, I think there's definitely been designers in this space that have treated it like a zero-sum game, but I really think that this is an industry where someone buying a game, even if it's not your game, benefits your game in the long run. Absolutely. Anyone who is touching indie RPGs, and especially these sort of queer, this sort of, I don't know what to call it, but this sort of queer core genre of games that has kind of sprung up, these indie games among indie games.
I love that title. We should call it
like,
we should call it that, queer core games. Yes, I love that.
Yeah. And if we're all like supporting each other and lifting each other up, like we're just helping each other. If a backer backing one of the other games out right now, my brain just stopped on what game I was going to call out. A backer backing Not Yet, which is a game I called out, which is on Kickstarter, and not backing my game doesn't make my game less successful. Like it makes our industry more successful. Absolutely. And like, yeah.
No, I love that. What a incredibly thoughtful answer, because it truly is, because I do think that's one of the most beautiful things about the TTRPG like community, and about specifically the indie queer core TTRPG community, is this idea of, we joke about this a lot, about like we're all passing each other the same $20, and it just keeps going around to each of us. But that's like, as much as that's a funny and a meme, but also that matters. So it is this mutual uplifting of all of our communities, all of our games, all of our creative ventures. And whether it is paying money to back something, or calling a stretch goal writer onto your BackerKit project or your other crowdfunding projects, like these things I truly believe, have a ripple effect on how powerful and how meaningful our creative ventures are, and how our games ultimately, right? So thank you for that wonderful, thoughtful answer. I know I threw one at you, so thank you very much for that. Now we get to talk about, now that we've gotten a very good flavor of who you are, Natalie, I would love for us to talk about Warrenguard. I would love for us to chat about Warrenguard. So first of all, fantastic game is a high fantasy game about dragon riding. What inspired this very specific premise of a game?
So Warrenguard, very interestingly, started from the mechanics up. Like usually I write from like I want a theme, and like I say, how do I capture that theme? But Warrenguard actually started its journey as me trying to write a game about the book series Animorphs.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna be increasing your volume here. Please do elaborate.
So Animorphs was this book series that is incredibly important to who I am as a person growing up. Like, I think everyone has a book series. A lot of people's hearts have been broken because their book series growing up was Harry Potter. My book series was Animorphs, and it like shaped who I am as an adult and as a person. And I was trying to write a game that was a love letter to that. And I was exploring mechanics, and like I said, it started off as a PBTA game. PBTA wasn't right. I was actually like as far as playtesting it as I had a mock cover for my playtest. This was Mother Nature's Children. This is my mock cover that I had for it that I was bringing out to playtests. And I eventually was like, okay, PBT isn't right. I need to go to the drawing board. I need to scrap. and I was reading like so many systems. I went into this mode where I was just like reading games. And then I eventually read a game my friend wrote that I'd played on stream before, but I revisited it.
Yeah.
It's called Ace Adventure and the Flying Royal Flush. It's a game by Brian LeBurge. It's not currently available anywhere. I'm actually working to change that behind the scenes. I'm working with Brian. Brian was never fully able to finish fulfilling the Kickstarter. Brian ran into money issues. I'm going to help Brian finish the Kickstarter very late and get the so that Brian feels fine releasing the game to the public, because it was such a big inspiration to Warrenguard that I feel like it isn't right that I can't reference a game that is out there.
Yeah. Sure.
But Ace Adventure uses the Fate Accelerated system. Fate Accelerated is just Fate stripped to the bare bones. It's like, how many mechanics can we pull out of Fate and still keep this engine running? Like, it's one of those cars where the doors are ripped off, you know, the sound system's ripped out. It's just an engine, 4 wheels, and a steering wheel.
Oh my God.
And I was like reading it, and I was like, wait, like, Fate has this mechanic where you spend a token to give yourself some sort of advantage, like to invoke what are called aspects, and you take a token when aspects are invoked against you when something bad happens. And I realized that's belonging outside belonging, which is what I wrote Sapphic Space Pirates in. Belonging outside belonging is you spend a token to do something good for your character, or you get a token for something bad to happen to your character. And I realized I can lay these on top of each other. And one can be for your animal form and one can be for your human form. And so I wrote a little playtest version of it. And I actually playtest games myself. Like, I'll write them down and I'll be like, okay, I'm going in the dungeon. Like, I'm going to roll this. Oh, this is what I want to do. Like, how do I, like, that's how I start playtesting it.
You are validating me, because that's how I've been playtesting part of my game. So thank you for validating me in the first place.
And what I immediately realized was, like, this doesn't feel like you are something. This feels like you're riding something.
Oh.
Like, mechanically, I was like, this feels like you are in control of you, but you're not in control of the thing that you're on. Like, you're in somewhat control of it, but at a certain point, it has leads of itself. And I was like, okay, is this a mech game? Is this a horse game? Like, what is this about cowboys riding horses? I was like, at first I was like, mech game, but there's so many fucking mech games. Like, I like my mech games crunchy. Like, I like my mech game to be like, oh, I'm gonna attach this gun to it and like this shield and like all sorts of like stuff. And Fate is not that. Fate is like very simple math. And then I was like, oh, I read the Dragon Riders of Pern book series coming, like, and I was like, what if they were dragons? And I was like, immediately like, and if the dragons have different breath weapons, like that leads into Fate's strength, which is like combat that is like problem solving. And so like, you know, something could use their ice breath to freeze it, and then someone could use their flame breath to shatter it, or like, you know, you could get these like interesting like people using their powers in interesting ways. And that became Warrenguard. So like the rider classes, the like classes of riders started as me. I was like, okay, if I'm doing belonging outside belonging, I like laid the Sapphic Space Pirates playbooks on top of it as just a way to start. And then started being like, okay, some of these aren't right. I need to lay these, like, and rewrote the what became the 5 rider archetypes. But if you read Sapphic Space Pirates and then you read Warrenguard, there's some things where I just kept the same move. Like,
if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Both of them have a class called the Fresh Face. They're different, but like they started off with the same, you know, Sapphic Space Pirates has the veteran and Warrenguard has the old timer, but the DNA started the same. They both have one of their choices they can both make are boots that echo, because that's something I wanted for that. And I was like, again, I didn't know I was writing a queer game somehow.
Natalie, please. Natalie, please. I'm begging.
But that's where Warrenguard comes from. Warrenguard was actually a mechanic-driven development, and then I realized creatively what it felt like, and
Mm.
then the flavor came in.
That is so deeply interesting that this was going to be an entirely different game,
Uh-huh.
with an entirely different, not even like a similar premise, an entirely different premise, and
Yeah.
being able to like build games from mechanics up. And I do want to tap into that actually, the element of like building a game from the mechanics up. So the system that you're using with Warrenguard is Fate Core and using aspects of belonging outside of belonging in your design of
Right.
Warrenguard. So
Yes.
and because you started with the mechanics up, why did you decide to use Fate Core and belonging outside of belonging and melding them together to make this specific game of Warrenguard?
Yeah. I've run Sapphic Space Pirates. I've run so much belonging outside belonging in my life. I've run so many different games, and the place where the game immediately struggles all the time is combat. Like you get into like a skirmish, and it's just like, well, I'm gonna take my strong move, and it turns into if you've got the wrong type of players, like it turns into like, I've got a big gun, I've got a bigger gun, like like how kids play on the
Yeah,
playground.
yeah, yeah.
And so I knew if I was gonna write in belonging outside belonging, like I wanted some sort of system that handled conflict well. Because even though like I said, I don't write games from a conflict perspective, when I was originally working on Animorphs game, like fighting is a big part of that setting. And so like I knew I needed a setting that handled conflict well. But Fate also, like I said, does problem solving combat. And a thing that I didn't intend for it to do when I wrote it until I started like deep into playtest, like realize what, as players started to develop strategies for Warrenguard, is that it also feeds back into the belonging outside belonging and my ethos for the game, in that Fate works best when you work as a team in combat. Like you can all just attack the threat. Like that's something you can always do. But that is not a good strategy in Fate. It's all about setting up these aspects that act as advantages. And the way a good Warrenguard will work in combat is they'll each take turns setting up advantages and using those advantages to build even more advantages.
Yeah.
And they'll build up this stack so that the whole fight is in their favor. And then someone will just come in and knock the whole thing down. And it works so well in feeling like a team. And that is what I wanted. I and Fate just was the right system for that. I think there's things that Fate isn't as good at, but for this specific game, like Fate is perfect. And especially like another thing, Fate as well, is Fate doesn't care about the layout of the battlefield. Like there's no distances, there's no anything. But you know what? When you're a dragon who's flying and diving, keeping track of locations on a battlefield is basically impossible anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it works fantastic for a game that is about moving through the air and having your like locations constantly shifting and changing, and like this sort of cinematic combat that isn't about grid squares.
I love that. I love that so much. It's just so interesting to me about that particular process of designing from mechanics upwards to build this game, and how it's birthed Warrenguard. And Warrenguard is a game that's about dragonrider, but it's also about found family, which is very interesting to me, because found family, as I've mentioned before, is a very recurring cornerstone in a lot of TTRPG gameplay. We joke a lot about all of our fun D&D campaigns and all of these asshole characters that we've made who've become found family with one another. Right? In making a game that's specifically about found family, what does that term mean to you now that you've made a game about that?
I think that like found family is about, to me, and this is something I said earlier, it's about people you wouldn't necessarily choose all the time. Like, you know, there's a difference between a friend and a found family. And I think friends are people you'd choose. You know, you have a friend group, but a family is like, God, this person gets on my nerves. But I would give the shirt off my back to help them, and they would do the exact same for me. And that is what Warrenguard is about, you know? It's about a group of people that drive each other crazy and have drama. Like one of the actual plays we're having on Critical Misses right now, our old timer and caretaker are an ex-spouses.
Oh God.
And they've still got to work together. And like that drama of like, this is a person who isn't someone I particularly like, but they are someone who I care about still and will always care about. And like that's what found family is. Like when I told you like this is based on like this workplace I worked in the early 20s where I was in, like working night shifts. Like those aren't people I talk to still on a day-to-day basis, but they were so important in my life at the time they were there, and those relationships are so transient, but they were so strong while they existed. And like that's what found family is to me. Like it's different than just your buds. Like it's about this deep connection where you have each other's backs.
No, I love that. No, that's a brilliant answer. I love that. Because found family does mean slightly different things to different people, and I always love hearing what that means to a particular TTRPG creator. And I love that you made a game that's specifically about that. And with that, with your entire theme of dragon riding and found family and finding comfort amidst conflict and adversity, how did the design choices that you made in planning Warrenguard and engaging in the development history of it drive those themes home for everybody?
Yeah. So yeah, I think the coziness is a really interesting aspect as like a theme of this game, which is there's so many things you choose in this game that just have like this cozy feeling. Like there is, you know, when you get to do a little bit of world building. There's like a world building in your session 1 where you design the rules for your Warrenguard and the warren that you call home and the hold that you protect. And things that can be in your warren are like steamy baths and a plush like sitting like room with a hearth. And each session starts with a sort of slice of life section, and some of those slice of life sections are like there's a chapter called Presents where it's about like everyone's giving presents to each other, and you get to express your character's relationship through presents that you give to each other. And there's a chapter, this one's a little bit less cozy, but I feel like Phil gets the theme, is there's a chapter where your dragons are molting. They're shedding their skin, which is incredibly itchy and uncomfortable, and you've got a psychic connection with that dragon. So everyone is just itchy and miserable and like snapping at each other. But when we played that chapter on stream, that was our first adventure for Critical Misses. Like it immediately turned into everyone taking care of this fresh face who was going through it for the first time, and like was like, you know, like this like, oh, you're not used to this. Like, we're going to set you up with an oatmeal bath. Like, we're going to make sure you're taken care of. We know that this is horrible and you're not used to it. We go through this every year. Like, and sort of these cozy things. And then the bell rings. Like, I also describe this, I've never worked in a firehouse, but it feels like a firehouse sometimes. You're fighting these giant monsters that are more like natural disasters than things that can be reasoned with.
Yeah.
And the bell rings because the oracle sense a monster's coming and give you just a few minutes to get saddled up and get airborne before, you know, a giant centipede erupts out of the ground and starts attacking the people that depend on you for protection. And the way damage works in Fate is you've got 3 stress, which are like hit points, and they're called stress. So as you're mechanically describing them, I'm saying like, this is like you barely miss, and like it's starting to get to you and weighing down. And then after that's gone, you start taking conditions, and you get 3 conditions, and then you're out. If you get 3 stress and 3 conditions, like, the dragons are fragile. And, you know, a moderate condition is something like a shredded wing, or we had someone, their dragon got the end of their tail bitten off. And so, like, and you've got these psychic connections to this thing. So you're feeling the pain too. So it goes from this, like, we're all sitting around the hearth and sharing presents to suddenly, like, we're out in the belting rain fighting these sky jellyfish through a storm, and our dragons are hurting and we're hurting, and we make it through, and then we go like lick our wounds and comfort each other. And like that became the loop of the game. And I didn't even realize that loop like until I started, again, from mechanics up, like until I started playtesting and being like, oh, that's the way this game runs. Like, this is how it feels to do that. And was like, and then I built the flavor of the game to go back and reinforce that.
Throughout that one section of you, like, kind of like describing the inner life of these dragon riders, genuinely gave me chills. I was like, oh, that is delicious and a lot of fun. And I, as someone who's an AP performance who enjoys drama and engaging with mechanics in a way that help bring out these like beautiful, vulnerable human moments, always gives me chills. And I have to give you like massive props. I sat there and I felt the hair on my back stand on end, and I'm like, oh yeah.
Thank you.
I was like, this is it. This is the good stuff. Amazing. Now I would love to pick your brain a bit more about the backer kit process, about crowdfunding your project. What helped you make that decision of, this is a thing that I'm going to crowdfund? Because that's a massive project that you've taken.
It is. And Sapphic Space Pirates was self-funded. You know, I paid for the printing, I paid for the art, I paid for all of that, and have made that money back since by selling through like IPR and itch.io. But it was a self-funded game. And when I wrote Warrenguard, like, as soon as I came to the mechanics, I was like, okay. I did kind of a quick math of like how many pages does Belonging Outside Belonging take, and I was like, well, I wrote Sapphic Space Pirates in like 36 pages, and then I was like, how much will it take to take the Fate mechanics? I was like, I can do that in about 80 pages, so I'm looking at an over 100-page book. Which, if I want to read well and look good, will need probably, 100 pages. You need probably 30 pieces of art. You know? And I was like, I have a day job that luckily, like, I work as a developer. Like, I live comfortably, but I could not self-fund that game. You know, I don't have that kind of income. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to crowdfund. And that was what it came to. It was like knowing that to make this book be the book I wanted it to be, and not just a bunch of blank text, I would have to crowdfund.
Absolutely. And I remember you saying earlier, I've picked up on it, I made notes in my funny little notebook, because I was like, that's something I want to tap into in a little bit. I wanted to talk about your earlier when we were joking about how you didn't intend for this to be a queer game, and it was meant to be aimed at a general audience. Please tell me how the general audience kind of like idea came from, and what inspired you to do that? Was it because you were intending to crowdfund it that you wanted to ensure there was a general audience?
that was a big reason. Was I knew that Sapphic Space Pirates, like in the lifetime of the game, like it's done pretty well, but we've sold something like 300 physical copies and maybe another like 100 on itch.io of just digital only, which is pretty great for a zine game.
Yeah.
But I knew that alone wouldn't be enough to sustain Warrenguard and make it something that would, there's no. By the time I'm done Warrenguard, like even with how well we've done in crowdfunding, I'll be lucky to like fully pay myself back. Like TTRPG design is not. It's a great way to turn a large fortune into a small fortune. It's not. It'll be very lucky to pay for itself, and then in the long run, hopefully I'll get some royalties off future sales on itch.io and IPR, and then we'll eventually like pay for my trips to conventions is what I'm hoping it'll do.
Absolutely.
But I knew that to get to the audience I needed it to be a game that would appeal to Reddit, that would I'm paying for Facebook ads for this game, and for people to see Facebook ads and be like, oh, that game, I liked Dragon Riders of Pern growing up. Like, that looks like a game for me. I mean, originally this game, when I was first writing it, was called just Dragon Riders. Because when you search Dragon Rider TTRPG, all that comes up are a bunch of Reddit posts of people being like, is there a good Dragon Rider TTRPG?
That is so funny.
And everyone being like, I guess you can run it in this system or this system, and all the answers are bad. So it was originally called Dragon Riders. I actually got advice from Meg Baker, who was like, if you call it Dragon Riders, your SEO is going to be the worst, and no one will ever find your game. This is a tangent off the question you were asking.
Go ahead.
I hope that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I was so stuck on a name for this game, and I have a playtest server that some of the members of the playtest server are in the call right now. Thank you, all of you. Are in the chat right now, but one of my playtesters actually named the game. I was like, what do we call this? And at that point, like Warrenguards, like the Warrenguard concept were just called flights. And people were like, oh, like you live in these Warrens and the Warrens feel like such a game. Like, what if you are the Warrenguard? And that's the name for the game. And that became one of my playtesters named the game, Amanda, who is delightful and is an actual player as well. And just like that community, my playtest server is also like such a big part of this game. And so like the community for this game named this game, and
I agree. I agree with Kay in chat. That name does indeed slap.
It does. Yeah.
One of my questions.
It feels fun to say.
Literally, one of the questions I did have was like, oh, why the name was one of the questions I did. It's in my notes. It was written there, and then you explained it in that lovely kind of like introduction of the gameplay loop that I asked you about before.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's where the name came from. That's fine. I was like, yep, that's where the name came from. And now we get the backstory of it. How gorgeous! What an incredible.
And then it came from a misnomer from me who forgot that Warrens are a thing rabbits live in.
Oh my goodness.
I was, my
How does this keep happening, Natalie?
I, when I came to Warren, was thinking of, there's an old I used to play Magic the Gathering back in the day.
Yes.
And there's an old card called Goblin Warrens. And I was like, oh, like things that like live in the rocks and things like that. Like that's Warrens. And I was like, dragons live in those. And it was like Dragon Warrens. And didn't even give it any thought. And then they were like, Natalie, that's the thing rabbits live in. And I was like, now it's a thing dragons live in. Like, I would love to tell you that for a little while, I was gonna like add these like sky rabbits as like a thing in the setting, and then my lovely friend Brian, who wrote Ace Adventure, was like, Natalie, you're making this too complicated. If you just say dragons live in Warrens, people will get it. Like,
yep. It's fine. Dragons can't live in war. That's the truth, objective truth now of the world, and that is A-okay and valid. 100%. No, I love that. Whoa, that is so deeply cool about how you are able to kind of like build out this game and hearing the way the community has kind of come together
Uh-huh.
in the
Yeah.
making of this game. And speaking of making community and kind of like building out the team that you are working with, you have stretch
Mhm.
goal writers. You have a whole team working with
Yeah.
you in the Warrenguard crowdfunding project. What has that experience been like in like choosing your stretch goal riders, inviting them,
Uh-huh.
even the idea of how you were going to like structure this team of the people that are going to
Yeah.
join you on this? How's that process?
Yeah. So Sapphic Space Pirates was me and just me, and I had a friend help with the editing who like just did it as a favor, and like I paid her some nominal amount, and then a artist who is a friend who did all the art for it, but it was really just me at the end of the day. And this game, I started out. There's someone I want to call out who is
Yes.
on the page as part of the team and is in chat right now. But Abby Kelly, who is my layout artist and art director. Abby was someone I met at Big Bad Con who handed me a copy of her zine game, Heads or Tails. Heads and Tails, which is just like a very simple TTRPG. If you can share a link to that, Abby, like Heads and Tails. I
Links
can't
are allowed in
remember
chat. Go ahead. And
Yeah.
link it.
Okay. Heads and Tails. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Heads and Tails is like a really simple like TTRPG that uses a coin mechanic. You flip heads or tails. But the layout of this as like a 4-page like folded game. It was one of the most gorgeous games I had like seen an independent designer make, because like so often like designers are like so worried about economy of space, and Abby was at Games on Demand and was like, yeah, I'm running my game Heads and Tails. I was like, do you do layout? And Abby was like, yeah. And then I reached out to Abby like a month later, and I think Abby was shocked. I was like, you remember me from Big Bad Con? I want to pay you money to do my layout. And
That's
Abby
amazing.
and I just clicked like as a working relationship. Like it would be like I would say something and Abby would be like, and this, and I'd be like, and this. Like we just build on top of each other so well.
Love that.
And I originally and then I realized like I was commissioning a lot of the art myself, but a lot of my art commissioning is like, here's the character class, like pick some things on it and like kind of draw that. I am not that. And so I realized like Abby would ask me questions like, what is the color scheme of this gonna be? And I'd be like, it'll probably have one. And Abby kept asking me these questions that I did not have the answer for.
A color scheme will happen at some point.
Yeah. And then I decided to bring Abby on as the art director for the project so that Abby can actually commission art that will work with her layout and like actually like commission the art that works around things. And working with Abby has been an absolute delight on this project. Another person we have on this project is Tony, who goes by Anonymous Gob online. Tony is our dragon artist. I have a local comic book shop I absolutely love. And I was in there and they're always bringing in artists to like sell their wares and things like that. And I was like, do you guys know any local artists who draw dragons? And they're like, oh, our friend Tony. And that's how I met Tony. Tony is friends of people who work at my local comic book shop. And we commissioned Tony originally. I was going to have a different artist do each dragon. And Abby was like, that's not smart because they're not going to match. And I was like, oh, okay. Because Abby is smart and that's why I hired Abby. So Tony originally did the orange dragon art and we were like, this is so good. What if we just gave Tony all the money and was like, just draw all the dragons?
Here, all the dragons. Please do the dragons.
What if we commissioned you for 12 consecutive pieces and took all your commission slots that you have available for like the next year and just have you draw dragons for us? And Tony was like, yes, absolutely. So we brought Tony on board. Tony also did the art for the caretaker, which is really lovely art. And then the other person who I have called out as part of our creative team is Laura Page Turner. Laura Page Turner was recommended to me. I originally reached out to Karen Twelves to do editing for the book, and she's like, I don't do developmental editing anymore. Like, I'll do copy editing, but developmental editing is a big drain on my time. But you should speak to Laura Page Turner for your game. And Laura has a ton of experience, it turns out, working on Fate games specifically. And so
what a gift.
Laura, it was so funny. I gave Laura this thing, and she just immediately is like I'm explaining a thing, and she's like, what if you just added this paragraph and just explained the tone of my game better than I did? Like the rhythm of play and like the mechanics of it. And then, I mentioned I'm not good at writing prose, and all of Laura's very good advice in the edit was like, you really need play examples that this person does this and this person does this and this person does this. And I was like, I can't write dialogue. That's like my worst thing. And so we actually brought Laura on to write all of the play examples in the book. And they are fabulously written. They're so cool.
Can confirm.
So Laura is, yeah. And then our stretch goal people, a lot of them are people I knew. I really made a point for the stretch goals because I am a white woman. I come from a trans perspective, but I am white, and I really wanted to be like, okay, this is us. It's my name on the cover of the book. Like, it is coming from my voice, and I can't make myself more diverse, like as much as I would like to. This is a creator-driven project, and since my name's on the book, I can't make it better. But immediately on my stretch goals, I was like, who can I bring in on the team? And Sebastian was someone I had done an actual play with, who I knew was a game designer. Sebastian Yue, who is fabulous. We were on a Yuzeba's bed and breakfast actual play together. I just love Sebastian. And Sebastian and I were talking just today about what they're writing a new rider archetype. And we don't have a name for it yet, but I can tell you what the mechanics are going to be as an exclusive for Designer Spotlight.
Designer Spotlight. Yes, I am listening.
The Sebastian's rider archetype is going to be kind of the anti-ace. The ace is dealing with being the best. Their archetype is going to deal with, I'm not good at dragon riding. Like, I'm trying my best. I really want to be good, but I struggle.
Oh my God.
It was something I tried to write myself and really struggled with writing. But Sebastian immediately got to it about no, this is about their relationship and about them trying to strive to be better. And about what it's like to be not the best at something, but still give it your all. And I am so excited for Sebastian to tackle that.
What an incredible perspective to have on that.
Yeah.
What an incredible perspective. Because I've seen archetypes in other games that it's called the doomed, or aspects of shit, you get your shit absolutely rocked is what the mechanics are. But very few games I've noticed are able to kind of show the flip side of that, of here are the values and principles that build a person like this and are actually very valuable and endearing and wonderful about this character archetype. So I'm very excited about that. That sounds so cool. Oh my goodness.
And then a lot of my other writers came from, I've got a pretty great TTRPG follow list on Twitter of people who I super admire, and was just, here's the thing, if you want to write for stuff, post on Twitter and Blue Sky and everything that you want to write for stuff, because game designers are looking. And I saw D'Angelo Murillo, who wrote Emerald Templars, which is a game I played, which is great, be like, yeah, I'm looking for some writing work. And I was like, you are? Immediately. And then Maisie Veselak, who wrote Wickedness, which is one of my favorite games I played last year. Just such a cool game. Maisie was looking for writing work, and I was like, yes, please. Like,
Incredible.
Draconics was the exact same thing.
Love Drac.
Who's on the project. Uh, and then Super Dylan, who's another amazing person.
Mm-hmm.
Super Dylan was, I'm going to be honest, was like man, they're probably not going to say yes. But
Oh,
like, if they
bless.
did say yes, like that would be really cool, right? Like that would, because Super Dylan, like, on top of being an amazing designer and a ridiculously good actual player, and just dang talented at everything that they do, is also has a huge audience. And
Absolutely, yeah.
as I hate to be super business minded about it, but I was like, who has a big audience who I could bring
No,
onto
but
this
it's
project?
important, especially in
It is.
crowdfunding.
It
Like if
is.
you're planning to
Yeah.
crowdfund something, absolutely.
Yeah. And Super Dylan stretch goal, I approached all the stretch goal writers and was like, you can write some world lore, you can write a new writer archetype, you can write some playable chapters, or just pitch me something. And Super Dylan pitched, I want to write a solo game. And so Super Dylan is writing a solo game about being a writer, going through your training at the Caldera, and like what it's like for a writer, like writing letters home, and like so you could, in theory, play this solo game as your character before you play, and like play through your basic training, and then like have this like fully fleshed out, like this is what this writer is before you
oh, I love that.
before you get in. Yeah.
Oh, that's so neat. Oh, I love
Yeah.
that. What an incredible team you've got now.
Yeah.
And
then we blew through all those stretch goals in 28 hours.
Yes, you did. Congratulations again.
Yeah, again. And then I panicked. It was like, I need more stretch goals. And Shan Benian, who the art that is behind us right now,
the gorgeous
all around
art.
us,
Yes.
This art piece, like we went to Shan and we're like, we want something like with like this like beautiful setting, and Shan came up with this, which is gorgeous. And we were like, well, we already have Shan doing another piece of art that's going to be in the book. We're like, what if we could pay Shan for a third piece of art that is kind of like a zoomed out like panorama? Because also, in addition to drawing characters great, Shan does gorgeous landscapes. If you've looked at Shan's portfolio, and we're like this beautiful, like zoomed out, like shot of the countryside with the Warren, those floating islands floating above, and dragons in flight, and then that sounds like a postcard.
Yeah.
So we've got to make a postcard of it.
Yes.
So we've got Shan doing postcards, and then I mentioned Jay earlier, and how Jay is a friend of mine, and Jay is a game designer I deeply admire. And Jay's work, there's a lot of Wanderhome in Warrenguard, and there's even bits of Yuzeba's Bed and Breakfast, the chapter mechanic. Yuzeba's does it differently, but that whole like there are chapters and you play through set chapters was a mechanic I stole directly from Yuzeba's. I also stole, I don't know if Jay calls it this. I don't know if Jay even has a name for it, but I think of it as like economy of choice. When you read Wanderhome, there are like choose two you are, two you aren't. And the ones you choose for each come out of the same list.
Yeah.
And so like you can have a character sheet that like looks like you're answering 4 questions.
Yes.
But you're actually answering 12. And it's less overwhelming than like having like a book of questions you've got to answer for your character. And that sort of economy of choice is something I really took from Wanderhome. Because that was, as far as I know, a J development. I haven't seen it in other games, but Sapphic Space Pirates draws its lineage almost directly from Dream Askew by Avery Alder, which was the first blogging game.
Yeah.
But that doesn't have the economy choice. It's like choose one out of this list that you are, or choose 2 out of this list, not that you are and aren't. And that seems like a very simple thing, but that economy of choice was something I took from Jay. So I was like, what if we could get Jay on this game? Would Jay say yes? There's no way Jay would say yes. And so I'm at the bar celebrating with my lovely boyfriend, and I'm like, I'm a few drinks in, and I'm like, I'm going to ask Jay if Jay will write a stretch goal. And Jay immediately says, absolutely. And so like we got to get Jay on the team, and
So
I'm
wonderful.
pretty hopeful we're going to hit that stretch goal. But if you all at home have not backed and you want to make my dreams come true,
Hey, there's the link. I've dropped it. Here's the command. I've made it so easy for you. Just click the link.
yeah,
Going back.
yeah. Back it so that I can achieve my dreams and have Jay Dragon write for something I wrote, which is wild.
And I've just got an incredible update from chat. Y'all almost at 250 backers.
What?
So
Let's
folks
see
who are
where
in
we're-
chat who have not backed, please, I implore you to go and back this
Yeah.
project like right
Yeah.
now. Please go ahead and do that right now. And while you are in the midst of this incredible milestone and this incredible project that you have brought to life here, we've talked a lot about a few of the mechanics that are resonant in this game. I would love to chat about a couple more, because a few of the questions have already kind of been answered by your incredible answers. But I would love to kind of chat more about some of your design choices here in Warrenguard, to give maybe the folks at home a little taste, so that y'all will go and click that link and go and back the game. So in that spirit, I would love to talk about becoming the rider, building your rider and becoming a dragon rider. One of the things that I picked out that was very, very interesting is typically in character creation in TTRPGs, you kind of build your whole kit, right? You choose who you are, you get your funny little equipment, you get any of the extraneous elements that are included as part of your character archetype together, right? But there's something very interesting that happens in Warrenguard, in which the dragon is not exactly the player's choice. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, that was something that came from like my early play tests, where I was like, one thing that I loved about the Dragon Riders of Pern is that the dragon chooses you. That was a setting, and I was like, if the dragons have these different personalities, you know, like the red dragon is fierce and vicious and almost like sadistic, and like the purple dragon is like holds itself like royalty and, you know, needs to be approached a certain way. And, you know, the gold dragon is like looking for natural born leaders. Like, what does it mean for an outsider who is someone who's done things wrong in their life and is trying to re-earn their place in society and doesn't fit in, to have a gold dragon? Like, what does that mean? You know, like, because if you were going to roll an outsider normally who's like the sexy bad boy who's like got some baggage,
he's
got
trauma up the wazoo.
You know, you might pick a black dragon who does what it takes to win and like is about victory at any cost, or you might take a orange dragon who are natural troublemakers. But what does it mean to be an outsider who gets a pink dragon that are fun and playful? You know, like what does that say about who you are as a person? That even though you're this like dark person, that a pink dragon would choose you. And like I immediately loved this. You know, something that's been part of Belonging Outside Belonging since the beginning are these questions you ask the table, where other players get to define something about your character. But to have luck itself, like this dragon that gets assigned to you, that shows you, be something that defines who you are. That's out of your control, was something that was so fun to me immediately. Like the first playtest I had them randomly chosen and was immediately like, this is the right choice, and I've never tested it another way. Like I think a table could like pick their dragons if that's what they really wanted to do. But it's also such a trope of the genre. Like I've read a lot of dragon riding books to write this. You know, I want to do a shout out for the Aurelian Cycle, which is a book series that I read as part of like, because I just like was like, what are all the dragon riding books? And it's a book series I read that is about like the aftermath of revolution, which is not a theme Warrenguard touches on at all. But it also deals with dragon riders as fighter pilots, which is a theme that is in Warrenguard. But that again has like that book. The main cycle is about the fall of these dragon lords who used to like use their dragons to oppress people, and they were toppled. And this is like the first like this sort of socialist group like rose up and took power, and they've chosen new people to be dragon riders that are chosen out of the common folk. And this one boy who escaped, his father was a dragon lord, and they were part of like this one family that all had the same dragons. But he like hides as part of the proletariat because he's like an 8-year-old boy. He like comes up as an orphan. He gets chosen to be a dragon rider, and he gets chosen by a dragon that's different from his family's species of dragons. And like that is part of the things that he has to deal with. Like, this is not, my father rode the Stormbringer dragons, and I've got an Aurelian, which is not what my whole family and lineage rode. And like, it's such a cool trope of the genre that I wanted it immediately.
It's such a fun, it is something that happens in a lot of kind of like action adventure titles and pieces of media. It's a very, very fun trope of whether it's dragons or like Pokemon, like a Pokemon that follows you that you're like, why are you here? This is not the combo that I wanted. Or getting a weapon.
In the terrible wizard books we don't talk about
the
anymore.
Terrible wizard books we don't talk
the
about.
Wizard.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
We don't talk about them. But yes, it is a very fun trope. And it's such an interesting choice from like a TTRPG game design perspective, because there's a lot of like player ownership and autonomy and like just venture or creativity that happens at the character creation stage. So having like a huge part of dragon riding, the dragon, be randomized is so fun, but also such an interesting choice. And I thank you for sharing your perspective on that, because I read that and I was like, immediately I was reading the book and I went, that's very interesting. I need to talk about this. It's so cool.
I think it also ties back into the mechanics where the dice come into play when you're on your dragon. Like, your dragon is not under your control. Like, it is a living, breathing, sentient creature who works with you in partnership.
Yes.
But has a mind of its own, and like, I think it feeds back into those themes.
Which is, a brilliant way of going about it, because a lot of other games, not necessarily dragon riding, because as we've just talked, there are not a lot of dragon riding games out there. But the idea of a lot of other games is that if you're a druid and you summon a creature, or if you summon an elemental, right? As much as we all acknowledge, yes, this is an independent creature, right? But really, in the mechanics, they're an extension of your own influence into the game as well, isn't it? So it's so interesting to actually gamify and have that exist as an actual reality in gameplay, and not just, yes, this is an elemental, please roll to hit for your elemental, right? Using your bonuses and things like that. So I find that very cool, and I appreciate that mechanic. Another mechanic that I really like, and it's a consistent theme that you as a game designer seem to really, really enjoy, and that's making choices matter. And one of the things I specifically want to call out is the rider moves and the GM moves. And the specific, when I read this, I was like, how very interesting. This is the 6 approaches. This is the aspect I'm thinking about, where you have 6 different approaches with different descriptions of what that approach is. And there's a very, very interesting bit that you've written here, where your first instinct is to obviously pick an approach that will benefit you mechanically in the long run, right? But the way that you've designed this is in such a way that you describe what you're doing, and that description is what manifests the approach. What inspired this particular venture, and like kind of like very, very not necessarily rigid, but a very like specific set of approaches for you to take?
So those approaches, I will say, like the 6 approaches, that's right out of Fate Accelerated. The clever, forceful. I actually tried a playtest where the approaches were different, where I wrote my own approach. Because I tried a playtest where instead of forceful, there was like ferocious. And then I immediately ran into someone who was just playing, who had a bronze dragon, who was just the sweetest, lovable oaf, who just kind of slammed into things.
Oh my
And
goodness.
there was nothing ferocious about the way he was attacking things, but it was forceful. Like it was like he was just slamming into things, like with this giant bronze dragon body, you know, and I immediately realized, like, oh, the people who originally wrote Fate Accelerated put a lot of thought into what these 6 are. I shouldn't change that 6. But the way I describe how you choose and the way it goes is not out of Fate Accelerated necessarily. Yeah. It comes from Ace Adventure, and the way Brian specifically ran Ace Adventure when I got to play it with Brian when it was in playtest, and like as promotional when it was up on Kickstarter. We did a series of actual plays, and Brian would always like run it, and you'd be like, you know, I'm gonna run and charge into the door, and Brian would be like, roll forceful. I'd be like, oh, but my forceful sucks. I'd be like, you said what you did.
You said what you did. Yeah.
Right. And like, I think it gets you to also like role play as your dragon better, because like there's so many times where I will like, you know, the yellow dragons are quick. They're the fastest dragon in the sky. Yeah. But their riders will be like, I am gonna bite this thing, and I'll be like, that's a forceful roll, and they'd be like, but my forceful's 1, and I'm like, yep,
it like, sure is, buckaroo.
And it gets this playtest where you don't want to just choose the thing. Like, I think playing this game poorly, and I try to get this through. Did you get the example with Laura's play examples?
Yes, I did.
I don't know
yes.
if you got. Okay, great. Like, I think you can play Warrenguard. To like any game, like play it poorly, be like, I do a quick attack. And they're like, what are you doing? Like, I attack quickly. But like if you're narrating and being like, I swoop down and rake my claws across while I continue moving uninterrupted, I'm like, that sounds like a quick attack, you know?
Yeah.
And I hope that comes through in the actual plays I've been doing, but it also makes it like a very easy game to teach as a GM, because the GM's really the only one who needs to know the mechanics.
Absolutely.
Like the players can just be like, you know, I'm swooping around trying to create a tornado. And it's like, that sounds like you're quickly creating an advantage. You know, you just have these set of aspects and these set of 4 actions, which are create an advantage, attack, defend, or overcome an obstacle.
Yes.
And like, whenever someone describes an action, it's very easy to take what approach and what action they're doing and mechanicize just the abstract.
No, I love that, because again, like that's another really interesting thing that I love seeing in designers and in the different types of games that they make is like, how are we bringing new players on board, and how are we going to make the experience of picking up a new TTRPG accessible and fun for them, and letting them get swept up in the narrative of it all. And I think you've done an excellent job of that, of like, hey, instead of focusing on I use a quick attack like this is Pokemon, like let's like paint me a word picture of how you're riding your dragon, because you're riding the dragon, like have fun with it, right? And I genuinely love that you've taken that approach, and you've done the same thing with the GM moves of kind of describing the because you do mention in the GM moves that they're not necessarily limited to these moves. A GM can pick and adjust on what fits the situation better, but being able to arm them almost with the tools that they need to respond to the situation. I would love to hear your process on ensuring that GMs have what they need in the moves that you've created for them.
Yeah, so GM moves are not out of the Fate core book, and they're not in Belonging Outside Belonging, but they are part of Ace Adventure. And I actually know where Brian got them for Ace Adventure, because Brian, if anyone knows, Brian is the Kevin Bacon of Monster Hearts. If you've played Monster Hearts at a convention, at PAX, at Gen Con, at Big Bad Con, you've probably either played it with a Brian or played it with a GM who played it with Brian. I am part of that. The first time I played Monster Hearts, I played with this great GM at FlameCon, and her first GM was Brian for Monster Hearts. Like, everyone traces back to Brian in the Monster Hearts community. And I'm going to grab my copy. I swear I didn't plan this, but I've got my copy of Monster Hearts.
That's so funny. Brilliant.
Monster Heart is one of the best written tabletop role-playing games. Like, if you want to read a game that uses economies well and really knows how PBTA works, like, read Monster Hearts 2. It is an incredibly well-written game, but something in it are these GM moves where Apocalypse World originally just said, like, when someone, screws up, take a hard move, but didn't really describe what a hard move was. It was just like, take a hard move. Monster Hearts actually defines the things a GM can do, which is like split the party, like make someone go darkest self. Like, there's all these things you can do when a player messes up a roll.
Yes.
And it's really great, I think, for new GMs who are like, oh, like, they just failed a roll. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, besides be like, you didn't do it. You didn't do the thing you tried to do.
Yes.
But to have these GM moves. And so, Monster Hearts did it, which inspired Brian to do it, which inspired me to do it. And it was also me trying to find a way, because I knew when I was writing it that it was when I came up with, like, playing Belonging Outside Belonging on Fate and, like, in development, I was like, okay, there's going to be this sort of rhythm of play where you have this slice of life section and this combat section, and what moves you between those.
Absolutely.
And that's where in the setting, it's the oracles who ring a bell, because I thought, like, a monster shows up and hopefully people notice it while they're having fun, was like, that doesn't separate the two things well.
Yeah.
So, like, the oracles came in and the idea of a bell, and I was like, I need a way mechanically to tell the GM they need to ring the bell.
Yeah.
And how do I do that? And that was like, oh, GM moves. Yeah. Like, Warrenguard has GM moves, which is not something Fate or Belonging Outside Belonging has, but came from Monster Hearts originally.
And it's, I in my opinion, I think it's a very helpful thing as a GM who's had to, as someone who has had to be the GM to get their friends to try indie TTRPGs and all these different games.
Yeah.
Having an area for the GM that's like, all right, this is my arsenal of things that I can use and that I can consistently refer to in case I'm stumped in the narrative. It's so helpful. And
then
go ahead.
if I can expand on my genius.
Please. Yes, expand on your genius.
The other cool thing adding GM moves in is it gave me the technology of this game, like I mentioned, has these chapters that are inspired by Yuzeba's. But a lot of the chapters have their own GM moves, which are like, if you read like the chapter like for High Society, where the players go to a ball, which is one of it's a fan favorite.
Yes.
We'll be playing that Saturday on Roll for Felicity, where we're playing the High Society chapter. The GM gets a move of ask the rider to do something outside their comfort zone. There's one called Inspection, where the Dragon Master General is coming to inspect the Warren and make sure there's no dust and and the GM move in that is very simple. It's the general arrives. Like, so you as the GM have this, like, you wait for your players to fuck up, you wait for them to be in the worst possible moment for the general to arrive.
Oh my god,
and the general arrives.
Oh, I love that because that's so like it's all like our like favorite beloved animated shows, growing up, where the cast of characters are up to shenanigans and hijinks, and then immediately authoritative figure enters the room, and they're like,
right,
no. I love that so much. Oh, that's incredible. I love that.
GM moves, having them in the game, gave me the ability to have that technology as well.
I love that so much. We talked about aspects already, specifically invoking it, which I genuinely really love, and we've talked at length about it. I do want the folks at home to know about compelling aspects, which is where you take a DL and get a fun little thing back. And I know it's a fake core aspect, but tell me about like utilizing invoking compelling aspects and how they fit in Warrenguard and why they matter.
So a really cool thing, a way that Warrenguard differentiates from a lot of fake games is you don't get to choose your aspects that are your aspects for your dragon. They are your dragon chose you. It has its own aspects and things like that. And one of those aspects for your dragon is usually a problem. I say sounds like a problem, like the green dragon. The green dragon is the dog of dragons. It is a dragonrider's best friend. It is about their attachment to their rider and like having each other's back. But that dragon has the aspect of will do anything to protect its rider, which means anything, which means you can, as a player, be like, I want to do this, but my dragon doesn't want to because it wants to do anything to protect me. So I'm going to take a token and a -2 on this roll to build up my store of tokens that I can cash in later. Or the GM can offer it and be like, I'll give you a token if you take this -2 and let me invoke this. And that also comes for your conditions you take as your dragon gets hurt. Be like, if you've got a moderate aspect of a shredded wing, like you can be like, I'm going for this hard bank, but my dragon has a shredded wing, and I'm gonna compel that and take a -2 to build up my tokens and make the story more dramatic.
I love that.
So that later I can cash in that token for the big hero moment, even though my dragon is hurting. Like, I'm gonna cash in that token to like be the thing that like helps us take down this monster.
I love that. Because that's the push and pull of the narrative, incentivizing the rising conflict that would happen in the narrative of the game that you're playing, and then allowing that kind of like really nice satisfaction of like, we've insert this situation and narrative, and now we get to enjoy this. You've just devastated me about the green dragon, because I love doggies very, very much, and so hearing that, I was like, oh no, I would be emotionally compromised. But I would also enjoy every minute of it. Oh, that is gorgeous. Thank you so much for sharing through Warrenguard. And with that, as we're coming up to about 1 hour and 40 already, Nat, I don't know if you realize, already 1 hour and 40 has passed.
This feels quick. I
know.
can go another 4 hours. Let's keep going. I just want to talk to you about dragons.
I love talking about dragons, and we could still talk about dragons, but I do want to open up the floor over here for our audience members. Hello, audience members. Thank you so much for sticking with us this entire way through. We're now in the audience Q&A section, so this is your opportunity to go ahead and ask us some questions that I can direct over to Natalie to answer about Warrenguard or about her approaches. So while you bring up your questions in chat, I'll grab them and ask them over to Natalie. I'm going to talk to you about dragons. Let's talk about dragons. Do you have a favorite baby? Do you have a favorite dragon?
So one of the fun things as a GM is I get to voice all the dragons, and I've run this game so many times that I just have like pocket voices for each dragon. Like a purple dragon talks like this, and a black dragon talks like this. But the bronze dragon is my favorite voice because the bronze dragon just kind of talks like this. They're just kind of big and sweet and dumb. And I love playing the bronze dragon so much. I also love playing the orange dragon. Orange dragons are nothing but trouble. They're like the troublemaker dragons, and they kind of talk like this. You know, I'm gonna bite him. I'm gonna bite him.
I love it.
And I just have so much fun doing the dragon voices when I run this game. And I wish there was a way I could package the dragon voices with the game and be like, here's the dragon.
Fun stretch goal pack, actually, is just like voice samples of the dragons, I think. There's your stretch goal.
Maybe that's a good idea. Yeah, I'll do like a YouTube video where I read the same sentence as each dragon and give you all the dragon voices. That's maybe not a bad idea.
No, literally, you could just like record a bunch of like on Audacity, like a bunch of MP3 like little clips, and it's just like recurring voice lines like for the orange dragon, I want to bite him, and people can just like in their VTTs have your voice and play I want to bite him for their table's orange dragon. I think that'd be really funny. Amazing. We do have a question from Clockwork Tuba. Thank you so much for your question. I know that there are 15 chapters, and some are reliant on experience to unlock certain ones. But is there a general order they will go through?
No. That's something that is from the Eusebus. Eusebus does not have an order. I do call out order ones that do make specifically good first chapters in the book. Because you really want your first chapter to be something that is going to kind of flesh out who you are as a team. But there is like, I give like these 3 chapters make excellent starting chapters. But beyond that, it is up to them. One of the chapters that we actually played as a final chapter on the Total Party Kiss actual play was an unlockable chapter called Last Day, where the old timer contemplates retirement and possibly retires at the end of the game, at the end of the chapter. I don't tell you what to do after they retire. Like, that's up to you as a table to figure out. Like, I don't want to flesh out like, okay, if a rider retires, like that player then like grabs another plate, becomes the fresh face or whatever. Like, I leave that up to your table to decide. And a lot of the times as GM, and I give this advice in the book, is I'll usually bring 3 chapters to the table and be like, okay, today, based on what happened last week, we can either do, you guys were really successful, so we could do festival and be like, the hold is holding festival for you. Or you guys have been doing such a good job fighting monsters that there just aren't monsters right now. So you guys could do downtime, which is you guys are just bored out of your mind and we make time pass as the bell doesn't ring. Or we could play this, hey, the caretaker has unlocked spa day, so we can give the caretaker a chance to go relax and have a spa day. And that chapter is all about things are going wrong at the Warren, but everyone's like, we can't bug the caretaker. And it's all about that like tension of like everything is going wrong, but don't bug the caretaker.
One of my favorite tropes in media is when the parental authority figure is away and everyone else has to deal with the gap that they leave behind for a moment. Oh my goodness, it's so funny. Oh, I love that so much. Folks, keep any questions coming. We'll still wait a little longer to get more questions. I have a question for you, which is about dragons again, because I love dragons and I like asking about them. What dragon would you be assigned?
You know, this is something I've talked with Abby a lot about. Like, I used to think like I'm a big lady, so like a bronze dragon, but I really think I'm a green dragon rider. I think that fits me. I think I'm very like I like to think that I'm someone who like pumps up their friends and like is that, and like I think that I am lucky enough to have like a lot of great friends in my life, and I think I would fit well with a green dragon. Abby did this whole long Twitter thread, which we should probably repush now that Warrenguard has been such a success, that correlated your dragon to your zodiac sign.
Oh yes, I have to go and look at what
and I'm
Taurus
a Leo, which is a gold dragon. Yeah, I don't remember what they all were.
I will have to go and look and see what Taurus is.
Yeah, if you look back through Twitter threads, we were doing that when we were like kind of early in promotion for the game coming out. But so somewhere between bronze, green, or gold, one of those three is me for sure.
Oh, I genuinely love that. I also just like asking game designers what their favorite babies are, because I know I have them. So I'm like, if y'all say y'all don't have a favorite, I know you're lying, because I have favorites.
Like I'll tell you, like I absolutely love like the caretaker. The caretaker is my baby. Like the caretaker rider archetype is all about like exhausting yourself caring for others, and that is a big relation for me, and like being able to mechanicize that. Like the caretaker is my baby when it comes to the rider archetypes. Like I love all of my children, but
I love all of my children, but you and like reaches out and holds them. No, I totally understand. That's why I asked these, because I'm like, y'all have a favorite, and I as an interviewer will get it out of you, and I love that so much. With that, it seems those are our questions for this evening. Thank you everybody for being here and being a part of this. We greatly appreciate all of you. And with that, Natalie, why don't you give us a lovely introduction, where folks can find you, who you are, and how they can further support you from here on out, and any upcoming secret projects, secret updates that we need to keep our eyes on for Warrenguard.
Okay. Yeah. Let me think if there's something. I think I've already shared my exclusives, which are what Sebastian is going to be, and what Super Dylan is going to be writing. You can find me at luckoftheharbor.com. That is my website. From there, you can find my Twitter, my Blue Sky. You can get in touch with me. That's also where you can find Sapphic Space Pirates, where you can buy physical copies from IPR or digital copies from itch.io. Or there's also a link right there to take you to warrenguardgame.com, or you can just go to warrenguardgame.com, because I bought the domain. I wanted to make sure I had an easy domain to link to. Or you can go to that like long link, backrocket.com/project/luckoftheharbor/Warrenguard, a role-playing game about dragon riders.
I love that you have it in your brain now to say it.
And we have so many cool things on the Warrenguard Backrocket. One thing I didn't touch on is I partnered with Dice Dungeons to get custom dice made for this game and custom tokens. So like you can back it and get these like lovely metal dice. Or if you're one of those like big spenders, we have a cubic zirconia dice tier. And I've gotten to roll these cubic zirconia dice. They look like glass, but they're heavy, like they're made of metal. Like they just thunk on the table. They're gorgeous. And if you back at that tier, I will run a session of the game for you and your friends, like run by the designer. You'll get your name in the book. But even if you just back at the $20 tier, like I'm so excited to get this game to people. I really, it's hard for me to really toot my own horn, but I wrote a really good game, and I really want you guys all to play it. So please back Warrenguard. The more backing, all that backer money, that's not just going in my pocket. That is going into artists' pocket, into writers' pockets. I've brought the really great writer V.M. Ayala, who is an award-nominated science fiction fantasy writer, is going to be writing these like journal entries from a dragon rider's perspective, starting like before they're chosen to their hatching, to like learning to fly, to their like first posting at a warren, to the death of their dragon, and like goes through this whole life cycle of this rider. And show you their perspective, and that's going to be like these journal pages are going to be scattered throughout the book, and like there's going to be so many like great things in this game, and all of that is only possible because you've backed it, and even more can be possible if you keep backing the game.
Absolutely. And you need to back it right now, because I made it so easy for y'all. Use exclamation point Warrenguard to please go and support this game. And honestly, it's a fantastic game, Natalie. You've made a gorgeous, gorgeous game. I'm very, very excited to back it and support you and play this game in the future. And thank you so much for being a guest here on Designer Spotlight. It's been such a joy having you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
It is literally my pleasure, and I should do my introductions. Hello, everybody. I'm Valiant Dorian. I use he, him, his pronouns. You can find me all around the internet at Valiant Dorian or at Otso SpiritBear. Please show that lovely treasure I just set you on. I'm a Ttrpg AP performer. I'm a Twitch variety streamer, as you can see, and I'm also, as of recently, a game designer. If you want to check out the game that I'm designing designing my first ever Ttrpg called The Beast Within. It is a narrative first action RPG about werebeasts, and it is reminiscent of 80s and 90s grunge fighting games. If that is your jam, please keep an eye out. It is still in active development, and the mini campaign playtests are about to start, so please keep an eye out for that. As you can see, I stream here on Twitch, and one of the things that I do is a lot of TTRPG content. Ttrpg Designer Spotlight will be rebranding soon. This week is actually the last week we'll be of Designer Spotlight before we fully rebrand to Dicey Banter. If you are a TTRPG creative, whether you're a producer, writer, developmental editor, whatever work you do, musical composer, whatever you do, I want to talk to you. And if you want to come and chat with me, check out exclamation point Dicey and register and apply to be interviewed with me. This will be basically how I'll be running it, so please go and sign up. I do want to talk to you, and I want to share your wisdom and all of your experiences out into the world. And in terms of my TTRPG AP performances, which is what I primarily do in the space, you can find me on Saturday on Transpaint RPG, where I play the misbeloved twin brother of the Chosen One, Sayir. We're coming out to a midpoint episode for Arc 2. So if you're interested in checking us out, please check us out on Transpaint RPG. I'll post that funny link into the chat, and go and check us out there. And about my game, The Beast Within, go and check out my itch.io page, where you can pre-order the game and check it out once it is released, and once we have a quick start guide, and join our playtests. With that, before you touch that dial, folks, we're gonna go raid somebody amazing, no doubt. So please hang on for a few moments, and thank you all so much for being here. It has been such a pleasure, and have a fantastic rest of your week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.